Go.
Good afternoon. This is Ray Anderson of the Three Consulting Amigos, and I wanted to give a little overview of who we are before we dive into today's topic, which is going to be exit planning. And I want to let you know a little bit about my experience. Between the three of us, we probably have consulted with 1,000 companies overall over the 30 years that each of us have been working. But in addition to that, we each bring a very specific skill. In my case, it's team building and getting the most out of your employees. Ron Burgess, who will be speaking here shortly, has a huge amount of management experience, but he's particularly focused on top line growth and marketing. Ed, on the other hand, is both a CPA and an operational guy and has been an operations manager and COO for a company for 30 years. So we have a huge breadth of knowledge and we really enjoy giving this to you. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this on to Ron before we get into the topic of the day, which is exit planning. Ron, give us a little insight into what you bring to the table.
Okay. I have been a small business guy for a long time. I started 5 or 6 companies over the years, and proud to say that every single one of those companies was accepted by the market. In other words, they all had top line revenues, and a couple of them lasted 15. A couple of them lasted 30 years. And for the most part, from manufacturing to retail to design and then finally consulting. I've been a consultant for 32 years. Was with a national firm for about 7 years prior to that. And so have a very broad background. I focused on top line growth primarily because that seemed to be the area that most of the people that I worked with was really having problems with. And my expertise is not accounting like Ed's is. It's really in business management, and then over the years has become more in marketing and marketing execution. But I do primarily strategic planning, and so that's sort of. And yes, you're right. Working with a national firm, I worked with literally hundreds and hundreds, not directly, but through 120 field consultants. I was responsible for communicating with them and developing new management products for 1,200 different clients. So that's kind of where I started. And then I've worked with several dozen small businesses from 2 or 3 up to about 250 employees, and worked with them for an average of 12 years. So very, very long period of time. I've been able to see what works and what doesn't work as a result of working for such a long period of time with individual clients.
Cool, thank you. That's been really a broad understanding of your depth and things. We're now going to transition over to Ed Lasak, who for years and years has been both a CPA, but most importantly to this conversation, he was an operations guy and he helped a huge company worth probably $500 million at one time do an exit when they were disrupted. And in that experience, he's developed a lot of talents that have really been able to help our clients move forward and develop an exit plan that makes a lot of sense for them and for the new owners and the people who work there. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ed. And Ed, do you want to give us a little overview before you get right into your exit planning presentation?
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction, Ray. My name is Ed Lasak, and I am a CPA who has focused as a CFO, COO throughout my career. I've worked at a lot of very profitable companies, and I've been involved with a lot of turnaround companies also. So in fact, I probably learned a lot more working with the challenge companies as I did from working with the more successful companies.
Yeah.
I think sometimes when your company is successful, you become lazy and you forget about trying to move the company forward. Whereas if you're in a turnaround situation, you only have one objective, and that is to move it quickly into profitability so you can survive. Right. So anyway, that pretty much has been my background. And today we're going to talk a little bit about exit planning and why it's important. And basically, an exit plan protects your business. It's a written plan that's going to help you get the price that you want at the right time based upon your desires and who you want to sell your business to. It protects key parties that you don't think about a lot of times. Your family members, business partners, employees, customers, and probably most importantly, the going concern of your company. Because a lot of companies that are run by an owner, they're at risk if that owner is no longer able to come to work. And so you have to plan for that, and that's what an exit plan does. It also minimizes your operating risk, your risk of uncertainty, and most importantly, taxes. It, like we talked about, it's a plan to get the owner out of the day-to-day chores of the business and promote him to the chairman of the board. So he's taking a bigger picture of the company and more involved with the key decisions of the company and the focus of the company rather than doing day-to-day activity. We're not selling a job, we're selling a business. And we need a capable management team that's able to assume these responsibilities so that the owner can move up in the organization. And obviously buyers prefer businesses with minimal owner involvement. And it's also important to coordinate your exit plan with your trusted advisors so that you can prepare for the next chapter.
Before you go on, Ed, you know, there's obviously a lot of packed into that one slide. Given that exit planning is so important, I think it'd be kind of fun for us to kind of go over how many businesses that we've worked with have meaningful, effective exit plans.
Well, I can't think of one actually.
Ron, how about you?
I would say that I've had one
Right.
that was fortunate to be able to go through to build an exit plan and spent 5 years developing that, but it was to be turned over to other family members. And it took, and they put the family through a very extensive training process after they had all been working for other businesses. And myself and the CPA, the other trusted advisor on the advisory board, really put these family members through the paces before they were allowed to take any real decision making on their own. Separate client, and I'm happy to report that they were highly successful. I'm still working with them. It's been 30 years with that particular account. A second client tried to sell their business for many years, probably 6 or 7 years. And while they were advised to build an exit plan that really made some sense in terms of creating value for the company, they couldn't agree on very much. And as a result, they didn't ever come up with an exit plan. So it was being seriously marketed, I think, for 5 years or so. They did sell it. It's a very, you know, it's a very nice business. They occupy their niche in Southern California and are the #1 player in their niche. They're excellent at what they do, and everything would suggest that they would get a top price. They did sell to a Fortune 1000 company, and they did get a decent amount of money for it, but it was only after they began to realize on their own that they had to really pump up their profitability, because they learned that people buy businesses based on proven profitability. And so they, in a way, they did follow some of the advice, but of, you know, that is here and that Ed talks about. So they did okay. But now at this point in time, I'd say that not another single company has a real exit plan.
Well, and I think the
It's
reason I wanted to bring it up
pretty
before
rare.
it really moved into it is simply to illustrate the problem that most companies have. You just said out of all the companies you had two who had an exit plan. One was good and the other one was not so good. In my case, I can only think of one or two, and in both cases, they didn't get the optimum price that they were expecting because they hadn't built the value in the company or developed a strong succession plan, which showed that the company could run without them. And
Right.
basically, in that case, the investors were really reluctant to make a huge investment in the company.
Yeah.
So, Ed, I'm sorry, we kind of
Well,
moved
that's
through that.
okay.
It's such an important element, and
I think it's very interesting, and I also think number one is there's a great chance you won't be able to sell your business. You'll have less of an opportunity to sell your business if you're leading the plan and leading the execution.
Mm.
It's not going to be successful if someone from your family has to absorb this responsibility without the right training.
Mm.
And then if you own a company with another partner, if one of the partners pass away, then you run into problems. All of a sudden, the partner that's no longer with the company, his family is moving in to the company. And there is no opportunity for determining an optimal price that meets the objectives of both parties. And many times, the people that are left don't have the control to run the company. So it's got all kinds of negative aspects associated with it because they didn't have an exit plan.
Yeah.
And so all kinds of challenges. But most importantly, you work so hard your whole life building a business, you need to take the care of it so that you're planned to optimize your exit from the business rather than allowing your business possibly to go out of business, which is not a good thing for anybody.
No.
Do one of you two know
And the economy.
what the numbers are in terms of how many businesses would like to sell but actually sell their business? Do we know those numbers?
Having worked a little bit in that industry, literally even those that are actually marketed, only 20% of those sell.
Yeah. Okay.
And when you get down to the nitty gritty, those companies with fewer than 5 employees, fewer than 15% of those ever sell. The rest of them simply close their doors.
Yeah. So I'm going to make a statement here that I don't have the expertise to really back up, but I'm thinking through most of the clients I've had over the years, and they didn't ever think they would be able to sell their business, but had they been able to get their business to run pretty much on its own with a manager and paid attention to these elements, I believe that probably every business has some kind of a market, because there are a lot of people who would like to go into business. They just can't figure out how to get in. And there's not a realistic expectation by the seller of what it is he's actually selling, or I should say, what people actually want to buy.
Yes.
They don't put it together. They just don't get it right. Yeah.
Right. And one of the things, and Ed, and then I'll let you move forward, but think of an investor, who wants to buy this job. He's either wants to buy it because it's an area that he wants to move into and he wants to fill the shoes of the owner, or he's making an investment. And basically, as what we're saying is most of the companies we work with are glorified jobs. They simply are, the person is tied to the job 80 to 100 hours a week. And since he has no exit plan, it becomes very difficult for him to sell because people are saying, what am I buying? So, sorry, Ed, but with that, I'll let you get back on with your presentation.
No, excellent. All very good points in amplifying the situation. Exit planning is a 4-step process, and it covers a lot of things that we've been talking about. And at the beginning of the process, you have to determine the strategy of who you'd want to sell your business to. Some people want to work in their business till they die, and then they need a plan in effect that It's going to identify who's going to take it over so they don't lose value. Or some people may want to get out and do something different. Some people are tired. They need some rest. They want to go on vacations. They want to do other things in their life besides spend 80 to 100 hours a week operating their business. So that sets everything up, the strategy. Who do you want to sell to? It kind of, what price do you want to get? And when do you want to do this? Do you want to do it within the next 3 years? You want to do it in 10 years, whatever. It's up to you. And everybody's going to have a different answer based upon what their objectives are.
I'm smiling because how many times have we gone to companies who said, yeah, I think I want to sell this year. And we're going,
yeah,
really?
Well, they want to sell in 90 days, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to set it straight, I mean, to sell a business, on average, it takes anywhere from 12 months to 24 months.
Wow. Thank
And
you.
that's accelerated.
Right. Now this, can you give us some kind of a timeline on these 4 steps? What's optimum and what's realistic?
I think the time frame is it's an ongoing process. You come in, you develop a plan, and then what you do is you meet quarterly to determine how well you're doing against the plan. And based upon that evaluation, you reforecast your numbers and you change the way you're operating so that you keep in line to what your intentions were at the beginning. So it's an ongoing process. And it's not someone being there 24 hours a day. It's basically once a quarter evaluating the numbers, evaluating the progress of the business, and determining whether you're moving in the right direction and you're moving at the right speed based upon when you want to exit.
Now, as you were saying this, though, Ed, that's contingent upon at the onset. You really start with the end in mind. This is who I want to sell it to. This is the price I'd like to get. And these are the steps I'm going to have to take to get there. And it could be a period of a year, but it's more likely 3 to 5. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, and so therefore, the sooner you get into it, the more opportunities you have to exit at a reasonable time. Remember, if something happens to you and you can't come to work, you have to sell it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you have to sell it without you being in the seat to sell it. That means somebody in your family's got to take over. How many people in your family are trained to run a business, let alone sell a business? So you can see the risk associated with not having a plan.
Yes.
And unfortunately, like we talked about earlier in the presentation, is that most business owners don't have a plan. They're taking this risk, and I think it's really true. We've all talked about it. Well, the biggest risk we all have is what we don't know. And there's a lot of people that don't know a lot about exit strategies, and they're too busy operating their business to learn more. So I really think you need somebody to come in and give you some advice. And typically it's not your normal trusted advisors because, quite frankly, there's not too many CPAs and attorneys that focus in this type of work.
Right.
So you really got to bring in some outside talent.
But having said that, Ed, that what I think you've laid out here for us is that there are many elements to this. And one of them is you have to get somebody who can help you sell the business at the end. But there are a lot of other steps that you've outlined here that can be done internally or with some help, like some outside consultants. Even in our case, we might be able to help. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir. That's very accurate. You need someone with an outside perspective and a focus for moving you in the right direction. There's 4 steps here. Each one of them is extremely important for making this thing happen. And you don't begin selling 3 years from now. You begin selling now. That's the 4th step, which means you have to engage potential buyers now. And you got to start telling your story, because your story of your business is what sells. That's what gets people interested in buying your business. And if you don't tell the story, it's going to limit the possibilities of who wants to buy it. And as we said earlier, and I think you said it, Ray, 80% of the businesses that go on the market don't sell.
Yeah.
So it's really prudent for any business owner to look at an exit strategy and a plan, and it needs to be in writing. And it needs to be followed up on a quarterly basis to make sure that you're meeting your objectives.
Ed, it seems as though a lot of times people are putting what they have left on sale, as opposed to putting the future on sale. We took, I'm thinking of that lighting company that we took a look at that was up in Northern California, and he had done very well for several years. But in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, he hadn't done quite as well for a variety of reasons having to do with the building industry and so forth. He was a beautiful designer, but he obviously had been focused on the boomer market. And today, the lighting business is focused on millennials. They're the ones who have the money, who have the new houses. They want to make them the way they want to look. And so he was trying to sell something. He had a whole bunch of inventory that was old, kind of a rustic look. It was beautiful stuff and well built, but he didn't have anything that would be considered contemporary or mid-century. In other words, he just did not think about where the company was going, or if he was unable to think about where the company was going, it means that he was only skilled in a certain look and feel. That's not a good market for a company. That's an old market, and you need a new market. You need an existing and continuing market so that a new investor can feel confident that the business will continue on, maintain cash flow, et cetera. So, that's it. What's your opinion about that? You've looked at a lot more of these businesses than I have.
Well, the owner can be the biggest advocate of the business, or he can hurt the business as well. And it's really hard to have an owner that understands all aspects of a business. And unfortunately, they're asked to wear many caps in doing their jobs. They have to be the CEO, the CFO, the banker. They have to have all these roles, and they're not trained for all these roles. So by not bringing in some outside people, you're limiting the potential of selling that business significantly, because you're not optimizing the business. And if you get in a situation where you're just coming into work and you're digging the ditch day in and day out the same way with the same tools, getting the same results, it's probably a good time for you to think about getting out of the business, because the business is optimized under your ownership. What you want to do is you want to optimize the business, any business that you have, and make it better year after year. And when you have a good exit plan in place, it forces you to think outside the box and all these different opportunities that exist. We're going to talk about there's 8 value drivers that really have an impact on the valuation of your company. About half of the value drivers are top line revenue. One of them is a balance sheet item. One of them is a review item, and the rest of them are expense items. And they're really important. They work together in telling your story and optimizing your business. We know another one where we looked at where the owner was just very difficult to deal with. And he got to a point in his career, he wanted out. He wanted out now. He wanted out in 3 to 6 months, gave it over to a business broker, and fortunately enough, they found somebody. But how much money did they leave on the table?
Yeah.
Whoever bought that business got a hell of a deal.
Yeah.
And the owner did not get optimal price.
Yeah.
And that's a failure because he didn't go through an exit process.
Yeah, and so the point is that what you're saying here is that so many of these companies are either not sold or a garage sale, as opposed to an opportunity where somebody says, "Oh my God, I need this business. This is incredible," and that's kind of the story you're trying to tell. Do you want to move to those other slides, or how do you want to move ahead at this point?
Well, I just like to finish covering the 4 steps. When we talked about the right exit strategy, we talked about the 8 value drivers, which we're going to get into more because they're really important. It's a big step. We have it here as a small step, and in reality, it's one of the biggest steps of the 4. But also, probably equally as big, is the succession and continuity plans to get the owner out of the day-to-day of the business. And as we talked about, that's what people want to buy. They want to buy a functioning business that's professional with systems and qualified people, not the owner. They're not too concerned about the owner because the owner's on his way out. They're going to have to pick up these responsibilities, and most of them aren't capable of doing so. So you got to have a well-run machine with all the different parts working well without the owner in there doing day-to-day work. He needs to get promoted to be the chairman of the board, where he's looking at the overall progress of the company and the direction of the company. And I think the last part is beginning to sell your company now. It's a 3 to 5 year process. You got to start talking with potential buyers, getting them excited about this potential company that could be on the market down the road, and you have to tell the story. So that's how you achieve financial independence is optimizing the price of this business that you spent your whole life trying to develop.
Cool.
Well, the next slide is basically some of the options of who you could sell to. And, you can sell to somebody in the family, which means someone in the family has got to be trained to run the business. You can sell it to your management team, but your management team normally doesn't have any money. So you got to figure out a way to bridge that gap. There could be new or existing partners that want to take a greater role in the company. There's been a lot of talk about ESOPs and where it's an employee-owned company, and I think that has a lot of value to some companies out there. And the owners, a lot of times the owners love the idea of selling to their employees. If you're lucky, you find a strategic buyer who's willing to pay extra because he can merge your operation into his. The only negative there, a lot of these business owners, they want their business to survive. They don't want it to be merged into another operation. So that's another thing you got to consider. And selling to a competitor is a great possibility, but very hard to do when you've been fighting with somebody your whole career trying to outdo them and have a more profitable business. It's hard to make that an advancement in that area.
And who wants to share your numbers with your competitor, right?
Exactly. And then the last thing is finding an outside investor. And there are people out there who would like to invest in a business, but again, they need a business that's functioning without the owner.
Yeah. And making a profit.
And making a profit, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the other thing is really, really important, and you got to have a team of consultants that can help you do this, because there's 8 value drivers and they're all extremely important. And by looking at them and coming up with individual plans in each one of these areas and meeting quarterly on the progress, you can really significantly change on the profitability of a company and the valuation of that company. And I always like to look at, well, any type of business opportunity, I'd like to be able to increase revenues by 100%. Okay, how are you going to do that? Well, it's going to require some top line revenue support. You got to evaluate your market. You got to make your customers very sticky to the business, that they need you. And you have to have opportunities for expanding that are profitable. That makes a big difference. So we look at doubling the size of the revenue. If you do that, and we reduce some of the expenses with that incremental growth, you're looking at a situation where your profitability will increase by 300%. And the last factor is the more effective you are in running your business, the greater the multiple is. So usually they take an EBITDA number times 3 or 4 or 5, some type of valuation increase. And if you can get that multiple to increase based upon how well your business is running, you could have a valuation increase of 400%. So those are big increases. Those are big numbers. So basically, when you look at a valuation going up 200%, 400%, you're looking at something that was that had a value of say $2 million, and you're going to increase that value to $8 million.
Wow,
That's exciting. That's $6 million of incremental price that you can get for selling that business.
And I think the example that you mentioned, Ray, that we're all familiar with, where he just kind of got tired of his business, exhausted, ran himself into the ground, and he had to sell immediately. I think that's about the way the numbers would have worked. I'm guessing, we don't know for sure, but I'm guessing he sold it for 1/3 to 1/4 of what the value of the business actually would have been had he gone through an exit planning strategy. So he left millions on the table.
He left millions on the table, and he probably only had a few potential buyers. Whereas if you're doing this right, you'll have 10 buyers that will want to buy it. And that just raises the price even more.
Right, right.
And Ed, that kind of goes to the point you made toward the end. You want to be able to tell a story that's attractive, that really excites somebody about getting this opportunity, as opposed to, geez, do I really think I can make it through this?
Yes. I just really, I scratch my head many times just trying to understand why business owners won't take any time to get into this area to find out what they can really do to sell their business. And again, you're not selling your business right away. You're not selling it this year. You're planning to sell it somewhere down the road, because you won't be in a position to run your business forever. You need a transition. You need a plan. And it seems like it's a smart thing to do. And I don't think it's all that expensive bringing in the right talent of people that can help you do this.
Well, yeah, going back to the earlier example, I mean, he could have had incredible advice for, in the tens of thousands of dollars, and he would have made millions. So yeah, it's an investment that's clearly worthwhile.
It's amazing. People will spend all kinds of time looking at their stock investments,
Yeah, right.
looking at their 401ks, looking at real estate, but sometimes they fail to maybe optimize the greatest asset they have, and that's their business.
That's a really good point.
Well, one of the things that I thought would be interesting as we move forward here, we can see these 8 drivers. It might be helpful, Ed, for you to kind of help somebody who's observing this. Are these things we have to do concurrently? Is there an order to these things? How does one go about moving forward on this plan in a way that really maximizes the profit?
That's an excellent question, Ray. And I'll go back to one of the opportunities that you and I worked on. And
when you do it, is there a possibility you can put your mouse on the screen and kind of show us which one you're talking about? That'll make it easy.
I'm talking about all of them, Ray.
Okay.
You talk about all of them together because you want to optimize value. And the customer that you and I worked on in particular, we spent a lot of time developing a strategic plan for them. We brought in all their top lieutenants. We brought in all the owners, and we sat down and we looked at the business. We looked at all the numbers in the past, and we looked at some opportunities of what we'd like to see in the future. And we brought everybody together and we start talking about each one of these 8 drivers. And as we did that during the strategic plan, we then prepared to-do lists and put people responsibility in being responsible for getting these things taken care of. And we met quarterly on them to look at the progress. And that seemed to be a very successful formula for optimizing the business. And in that situation, we did double revenue over a 3-year period, and we increased our bottom line 8 times. It did work. And it required total, everybody on the same page, total dedication to the plan, and then quarterly follow-ups. And it worked. But it all started with a strategic plan. We got into succession planning, and we looked at potential ways of selling the business down the road. So we did all of that all at once as part of this process, and it was successful.
If you can increase the revenue, the bottom line profit by 8 times, what does that do to the value of the business?
Well, it increased the value 8 times just on that, but in reality, it almost went another 50% above that because we increased the multiple.
Right.
The multiple of the business when we started was at a 4. I think when we got done optimizing the business, the multiple became a 6.
Okay.
And
So
that really increased the value of the business.
So it's actually a multiplier effect. It's not really a straight line increase. So you can these leverages. It's literally levered as you push on the short end of the teeter-totter, and it lifts up the long end of the teeter-totter.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So Ray, it's not looking at one at a time. It's looking at all of them at the same time and leveraging the talent of the business, putting different people responsible for each one of these initiatives and reporting back quarterly on the progress being made. And from that, we could change the plan. We did make some changes, and we did really auger in on some really key issues of the company that was preventing it from prospering. And one of those in particular was workers' comp and how they utilize their people out in the field, their flexibility on handling new business. In this situation, they didn't want anything to do with government. Well, we got them involved with government, and we found out that government now is their highest profit margin business that they're doing, and they pay their bills on time. And it's been a wonderful advancement for their company to get involved with that new business.
And if I can add, one of the dynamic changes we made is getting the frontline involved in getting the work done and having them benefit from it. So that they were not only incentivized to be able to make some money, but more importantly, the more they helped grow the company, the more they were able to earn. So it had a multiple effect on the bottom line profit, which was also interesting. So, to your point, Ed, these things have to be done concurrently, but without having a strong team, it's going to be very difficult to do that. And the outside influence also was helpful because we were there as kind of a neutral third party, helping, not necessarily taking any particular role in any function that would deprive them of anything. I mean, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it sure does. And I think that's the best way of approaching this. You need that outside guidance and advice for moving the company forward.
Ron, based on your experience, as you look at these, and I know that you've had the opportunity to actually transition one of your biggest clients from the parents to the kids, did you use a similar kind of a process to be able to migrate them in an effective way?
Yeah, I mean, I think as I'm kind of looking at this, we did a lot of these drivers. We did a forecast and evaluation every quarter, like clockwork, with very specific reporting, not just financial statements, but a whole series of management reports. Very disciplined about that. took a look at optimizing cash flow based on the investments that we were doing. And we took a look at return on investment for various projects that we were going to invest in, with the idea of to determine whether or not we could afford to do that. So whether it was piece of equipment in the plant or investment in new trucks and so forth. There's a lot of moving pieces in this business. It was like 3 separate businesses, and so it took a lot of work to make and do those evaluations. The efficiencies were always important and always measured, but they didn't really focus very much on what we would call sort of standard incremental improvements, and so didn't have a program like that. But then on the other hand, when we talk about these other ones, which I left to last because I'm going backwards around the clock here, we looked at the opportunities to grow revenue, and of course that's where my focus is primarily. And we spent really a lot of very detailed time studying various markets to determine, how deeply we could penetrate a particular market with the products that we had. We also did the same exact thing by determining really whether or not we needed to add additional products for those markets, for those particular people in the markets. And so we took a, very, very deep look at customers for a long time, for many years, and understood probably more about customers than any other business in its relative size that I've ever been aware of. That led to a way of stickiness for the customers. It's a high turnover business naturally, and so there's a lot of heavy selling that goes into their products to get people to buy it. And so as a result, they may lose maybe a half a customer for every new customer that they sign up, and so it's a constant churning. So we did a whole lot of research into how to become stickier and how to develop customer reward programs. We looked and spent a lot of time looking at the value diamond, which we talked about last week, to help us prioritize whether we're going to focus on service, quality, price, or image. And we started with the things that were cheapest many years ago, I might add, were cheapest to do. That happened to be brand and image. That was the easiest thing to do. We worked on quality for many years. And service is a big, big deal, which created the stickiness. And of course, all of those things flow into the market potential. It doesn't do any good to sell a business if the market, as I mentioned, if the market's used up. So by our calculations, based on the top 20% of the customers that are producing 80% of all of their business revenue, the customer types, not individual customers, but customer types, there are still about 300% more in the market of those particular customer types than the customers we have. And so we figure that we've got an upside of at least 30 to 40% more, but probably more like 100%. So we don't have to look into new markets for another 10 or 15 years. So when you have an organization then that can be run by management within the company, both of the owners can step away for weeks at a time, and the company would continue to run essentially on its own.
Right.
The 2 owners, one of them had a brain tumor and was out for 6 or 8 weeks, and the other owner was able to, it was a little bit difficult, but was able to continue to run the business the same way. The reverse happened in a divorce of the other one, and so the second owner was able to take over and run the business that the first one did. So I would say that with the exception of improving efficiencies and productivity, which we need to do there, every one of these drivers has been in place, and that has created tremendous wealth for both the sellers, the parents, and the buyers, which are two of the 4 kids.
One of the things that I wanted to point out that's really important to what you just explained and what Ed's explaining is first of all, you need the plan. But if you don't have the discipline to follow it and execute, that's where we run into problems. But it all starts with a strategic plan. Okay, where are we going? How are we going to get there? And the point that Ed's making, and I think you have too, Ron, is that when you do have an exit plan, it enables you to make sure that the things you're doing are consistent with where you want to go. As you were saying, you've looked at that marketplace so deeply that you know that you have at least 10 years worth of growth left in it. Now, how many clients know whether they got enough depth in their market to make it past the next payroll?
Well, my clients know that because I do it for them.
Yeah, no, well, I understand that. But what we're saying here,
they're right.
What we're sharing with our audience more than anything is create a plan, execute it, and use discipline. And if you have this kind of support we're talking about here, you can do very well, as we've shown here with a client that we've had, your clients, etc. That's what we're trying to share with everybody. So with that, Ed, you want to kind of move it forward because there is so much we can unpack in this.
I think this item right here, I don't know if you can see my little cursor on it.
You can, yes.
Yes.
Forecasting the numbers and evaluating them quarterly keeps the trains running. You can spend a lot of time doing a strategic plan and coming up with numbers. Most strategic plans don't have numbers, and I don't understand why, but they should have numbers and they should be evaluated quarterly, because if you don't, it's worthless. It's going to sit on a shelf and someone's going to say, do you have a strategic plan? Yeah, I sure do. But that doesn't mean anything because you're not really using it to your advantage. So,
and I think in my experience, I've had people dust it off and say, here it is.
Yeah.
They point to it. Oh yeah, we've got a trade. It's right there. Yeah.
Right.
So having these quarterly meetings with the key management of the company is really important for moving forward with that strategic plan and your exit plan to make sure you're making progress.
Now, the point you made here, and this is something we need to touch base on, simply to help people understand why they lose their way. What you said is so important. They have to review the numbers. So, in other words, as I heard you say this, and Ron, you were speaking about it directly, it's one thing to have a forecast. It's another thing to review it on a quarterly basis and say, are we going in the right direction or are we going in the wrong direction? And I'd like feedback from you guys. How many of the companies that you work with actually review their numbers on a regular, consistent basis?
Well, the companies I'm associated with, they get their numbers within 7 business days or 3 to 7 business days. And they're looking at those numbers right away. And those numbers are passed out to all the department heads who are accountable for their budgets, their performance compared to last year. And it keeps everybody on target. I really don't know how you can manage a company when you don't have numbers. And there's no discipline of your management team to explain why they're up and down in various categories.
Amen.
A good CFO and a good CEO and a good owner, they're going to be looking around every corner looking for something that's going to come and surprise them. So if their cost of goods have significantly gone up from one quarter to the next, they're going to want to know why. What's causing that? That way they can go in, find out what the problem is, and make a correction. How many companies operate without that type of intelligence? There are some out there, but I would say most successful companies, they have their numbers, they're calculated in an accurate manner, and people are responsible for their segment of that P&L statement.
And if you what I was trying to get more deeply into with this, Ed, is, basically the numbers drive the business. And, my experience too many times, we get all locked up in payroll, which is all based on hours worked. And hours worked has nothing to do with the business results. Zippo. The only thing that counts is, are we doing well or are we not doing well against the strategic plan and the forecast? And sometimes, companies are reluctant to share information simply because, well, I don't want them to know. They might get to the competitors or whatever. But the truth is, the more that everybody, even the front line, when you're in construction, everybody knows what the bid is. I mean, basically, when you go out, the purpose is to get the job done as quickly as possible, on time, complete, and no chargebacks. Now, in that process, if you got frontline workers who get it and say, wow, this is wonderful. If they are only working by the hour, it's Wednesday afternoon, they're done. I guarantee you they're going to spend Thursday and Friday making work because they don't understand the value of getting it done. Whereas once they get it, they say, holy mackerel, I could get a bonus if I get this done 2 hours or 2 days early. That's an example of how a good use of numbers and a good exit plan and a strategy can really drive profit.
Absolutely, and transparency is extremely important. So hiding the numbers, to me, really doesn't achieve your objectives. People need to know how they're doing. They need to be able to dig into their department budgets and find out why they're up or down. They need to dig into those numbers to determine what type of opportunities there are to make those numbers look better. So those are really important. And unless you have the numbers available to everybody and you're reviewing them, and it's a culture of the company to do so, you're losing out on an opportunity. So of all the different circles on here, one of the most important one is those quarterly reviews. And sometimes it's not done because you bring somebody in, you come up with a plan, they go out the door, and nobody follows through with the execution of that plan.
Exactly.
So to give you
so it goes back to what we were saying. You have to have a plan, and then you have to have the discipline to execute the plan and see how you're doing. And I think what we're trying to share with people is that if they were to follow this formula and have somebody to be able to help them, they could make a massive difference. One of the challenges I've seen out there, it's like we start talking about sharing numbers and people get apoplectic. It's like, oh my God, I can't let anybody know the numbers. But what we've tried to do is say, you don't have to put the dollars out there. You can make them percentages. There are lots of ways in which you can hide what you're sharing so that the competitors don't get it, but it still gives the people who need to execute what they need to do and make the goals tied to those percentages. Is that consistent with your own thinking?
That's very true. But when you're talking to your top line management team, I think transparency is extremely important, and I think you show them the numbers.
Yes.
And more importantly, you ask them to be accountable for the numbers in their department and look for opportunities to make the company more profit. More profit has the ability to pay out more incentives, the ability to save for a rainy day. And as we all know, we've had some rainy days of late.
Yeah.
So you have to be strong, and you need a strong balance sheet to do so. And so you need this rigor, this discipline in the organization to make sure that you're meeting your objectives. When you look at these circles, the 8 drivers, we talked about 3 of them being on top line revenue. When people bring in experts to review their company, how many people bring in experts on top line revenue? It doesn't happen very often.
Ron's the only one I've ever known that understands that. I think, that's
exactly. So what ends up happening, everybody focuses on this one circle over here, improve efficiency, productivity, and quality.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is important, don't get me wrong, but there's all these other opportunities to invest in high ROI projects. For some reason, people will use old, outdated technology and equipment because they don't want to make an investment to come up with something better. Right. And that blows me away. And if you show them the ROI, you got a 20% ROI on this investment, you're crazy not to do it, right? Yeah. You borrow the money for 4% and you make 20%, that's a good deal. That adds value to the company. The optimizing the balance
here, without a plan and without understanding the numbers, you won't make that investment. And that's what we're trying to share with people, I think, is that when you have a good plan and you've been tracking it, you know whether you're going to get a return on investment, as opposed to saying, I can't afford this, and so you're trying to grow your business by compressing costs and getting no closer to being able to do the expansion of the multiplier that a good exit plan will give you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was in an interview the other day, which well, since I'm retired, I wasn't for sale, but they were looking for somebody to help them with marketing. And so because one of the principals is a friend of mine, just agreed to sit in with 3 or 4 guys. And when we were talking about, well, what could you do to increase top line revenue? And I said, I can't give you any magic stuff off the top of my head here because, you know, and he breaks in and he says, you know what? I hate marketers. And I said, well, you know, okay, why? He said, well, can they come in with all of these ideas and they don't tell me what it costs, and they'll never tell me what they can actually do with it. And, you know, I mean, you love them and then you hate them. I said, it sounds like you're maybe a little different, but I just got to tell you, I hate marketers. And I said, you know, I agree with you completely. There are not very many marketers that talk about top line. They talk about costs. They talk about how much it's going to cost to redo their website. Those are not market strategists. Those are design people masquerading as marketers.
Right.
Most of those people are masquerading, and so that's why this guy, number one, he was a little bit of a straightforward guy, which I like a lot. That's why he said, I just want you to know I don't like marketers. I think he was a little bit surprised that I agreed with him. Because for the most part, just in terms of business effectiveness, I don't like marketers either.
Yeah.
So, but then on the other hand, he wanted magic. He was asking for something that could happen immediately.
Yes.
Now, why was that? It was because he himself, for his business, had not looked at the wider market, at the long run. He was always looking at the short run, always selling. COVID came along. He lost 2 or 3 of his biggest accounts, and now he's got nothing. So he didn't follow this on one hand. He hates marketers because they can't do magic for him. And he doesn't want to, and he said, well, you're PhD quality, PhD level. We can't afford that. And I said, well, no, you probably can't afford it. But I'm just telling you, I can't give you any advice if I don't know the whole story. And normally that takes 18 months of me working in your business to figure out where to go. It just doesn't happen by itself.
Well, it gets back to the ongoing quarterly reviews.
Yes.
Rather than coming in and just doing a report and then leaving. That's where the real value is making sure that everything's working right and fine-tuning your approaches. So I really believe in that. I really think that's really important. The other thing on here, this little circle right here called optimized balance sheet and cash flow is so important, especially after what's happened with COVID-19, where companies were over leveraged. They didn't look at their balance sheet, didn't look at all the liabilities they had out there. A lot of them didn't have a good relationship with their bank. So when the PPP came into effect, they had nobody fighting for them to get the money. And so you ask for money when you don't need it.
Right.
That's when you load up in your balance sheet so that you have the money when you need it without having a problem getting it from the bank. Because if you ask for money from the bank when you really need it, it's going to take forever and you're going to lose out on opportunities.
Right, right.
And the other thing is take a look at working capital, current assets minus current liabilities, and you take a look at that as a percentage of your revenue and determine whether it's being managed effectively or not. Because a lot of times it takes a lot of working capital to generate revenue, and that's not a good thing. It's requiring a lot of extra equity and debt in the company to service that. So there's ways to take a look at that, but a lot of times you bring people in, they're going to look at efficiencies. They're not going to look at your balance sheet. In fact, I don't think most business owners really understand their balance sheets, and that's where
they don't.
That's where you spend a lot of time educating people.
Yeah, and we're almost out of time here. I'd like to make a suggestion. There is so much information here. next week, if you guys are in agreement, what I'll do is I'd like to focus on improving efficiencies, productivity with people. And then you guys pitch in and how, from your perspective, how that ties in with, your balance sheets or top line growth or et cetera. Because these things don't operate in isolation. They operate as a whole. And so many times, as you said, Ed, the owners aren't as transparent as they need to be with the people who can really make a difference. And so part of what I'll do next week, I'll show them how to get access to money that they can use to be able to uplift the skills of their management staff and their frontline to be able to do these strategic plans. These aren't expensive. These are growing things as opposed to costing things. So, this has been a wonderful way to get started, but it's only the tip of the iceberg, and we could go on with this for probably a year. So, having
It's
said
hard
that,
to discuss because it's so vast.
yes,
But I think any conversation we have down the road, we should tie it into this wheel.
yes,
Yeah.
I think
This
you're
is a
absolutely
great wheel.
right.
It covers all aspects, all opportunities of running a business and for fine tuning your business and making it more effective.
Right, and as an example, I was looking at the two upper right, increased stickiness and opportunities to grow revenue, and that's your value diamond.
Yeah.
So each, as we move forward, we're actually just diving deeper into each one of these, so that somebody who's listening can say, hey, I could do this if I got my people involved. I could develop a plan. I could develop the discipline in order to make that happen. So. Let's wrap it up, guys. It was a good session. I want to thank Ed for kind of laying this out, and I guess Ron, you helped put it together. I
Absolutely.
think it was a good conversation.
Ed is the brains behind it. That's what counts.
What, you're just another pretty face?
I'm just another pretty face.
Ron, he's very modest. He's very impactful when it comes to running the business and finding.
Well, and I think the point that for all of us is it's not. We have as the Three Consulting Amigos, we have very specific skills that we can bring into a company, but we all come at it from having had experience in the overall company. So we don't come into something without thinking about the other pieces, and that's why we work together well inside of companies, because we respect one another's expertise and realize that as a team, we can make a much bigger impact than we can independently.
Well said.
So with that, I want to thank you, Ron and Ed. I look forward to moving forward. Next week, we'll talk about how you can get more out of your teams and improve your efficiencies, but we'll do it in the context of your experience as well. So we'll always make sure that as people move forward, they understand how these pieces lock together.
Sounds good. See
Very
you
good.
next week.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cool.